into contribution to nation building. We teach STEM because we want to contribute. We want to improve the Philippines. We want to improve Indonesia. We want to improve our community. And at the same time, we want to improve our world into a better world in a new normal context. We need to restructure our programs, which I am going to discuss later also. How are we going to develop? What are the new programs that we need to introduce to our students? What are our priorities? And when we talk about priorities and programs, it includes budget. How do government support our program in STEM? Are the politicians supporting STEM education in our country? Or is the government putting priority on science and technology? And what do we expect to achieve from this? What do we expect? So our high score students who will become engineers or scientists, or better citizens, better professionals, better individuals who are STEM literate, who can contribute to the solutions of our problems. At the micro level or at the school level, we need to rethink at the activities that we give to young children. Science is too Western in many countries. In the Philippines, it's still too Western. I think it is time for us to look at science as a human activity. Science as a culture that emanates from the activities and the lives, culture of the people. That's the reason why I love Indigenous science. I started loving Indigenous science because I guess science is not just a Western idea. It's not a Western influence. Science is very much present. STEM is very much present in our lives, even prior to prior to all of these innovations that we have now. We need to look at the learning outcomes. How do we see STEM as a discipline or as an integrated discipline? What learning outcomes do we want our student to produce or to develop? What learning activities should be given to students and what assessment tools? So at a micro level, we need a STEM that is learner-seeking and learner-empowering. STEM is useless if we are just translating STEM into scores, into grades. STEM can only be important if it was able to develop a learner who is active, an active and productive citizen of his or her country. Now, the approach. STEM is always multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary. However, if you look at how STEM is taught in elementary or high school, science is still taught as a separate subject. Math is still taught as a separate subject. STEM is just a track. But we have to go back to the original purpose of STEM education. When we say multidisciplinary, it is an integration of 2 or 3 or more disciplines. So here we have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The topics are disciplinary in a way, only it is presented in a multidisciplinary perspectives. However, with the 4th Industrial Revolution, with the new normal that we are experiencing, STEM should move away from multidisciplinarity to embrace the idea of a transdisciplinary curriculum. A transdisciplinary curriculum would mean we focus on issues, we focus on problems, we focus on different ideas, we focus on different solutions rather than focusing on disciplinary topics and enjoying the disciplinary boundaries. So we need to restructure the curriculum because the curriculum embodies our idea of STEM education and our commitment to STEM education. So another thing, we need to expand the curriculum. Yes, it's STEM, but now it has become STEAM. Okay, that's the idea, from STEM to STEAM. But there is also a disagreement, an argument, or there is also what we call this, a discussion about what is A and STEAM. Is it agriculture or arts? For some educators and scientists, they would say that arts is already part of engineering. Design is already part of engineering. And so, for example, in developing countries, now that we are focusing ourselves to human security and food security, we want to focus on agriculture. How do we integrate agriculture to enable students to what you call this, contribute to food security? Okay, that will lead to higher goal, human security. Agriculture is the source of our living. Arts is already part of engineering. So that's also the defense of the other group. But for me, whether it's agriculture or arts, we need to expand the curriculum and we need to make STEM more realistic and more practical than theoretical. We need a STEM program that will truly stimulate or boost our morale in doing things or in solving the problems of our society. Another thing, when we talk about access, we need to make the curriculum relevant to the learners. Our STEM today is different from the STEM that we have during our time. The students are now what we call the millennials, the Generation Z. Okay, these are quite different from us. Before, during our time, there are only few people. There's a great digital divide during our time. Only few people, only people in the city, major cities would have the technology and access to internet. But now, the millennials are what we call technology savvy. They all have it. Okay? They want to learn more about the world. Before, we only read through books. But now, Google is becoming a verb. If you want to know something, you just Google it. If you want me to speak in Indonesia, I have to take a boat or a plane to go to Indonesia. But now, because of technology, it has brought us together closer. And the millennials are very much into technology. They say we are, in our generation, are called technological immigrants, while the millennials are what we call technological natives. So how do we present STEM to them when those who are developing the curriculum are part of the old guards? But now we're thinking of new learners, millennial learners whose interests are different. Their interests are different from us. Their learning styles are different from us. How can we make now curriculum more relevant to the millennial learners in order for them to find STEM as a possible way to develop their career, okay, or to prepare them for career? Another issue for restructuring is that, and access, is that STEM as a gender-inclusive program. How can we increase access by allowing more women to join in STEM career? Allowing more women to join, for example, in science, technology, mathematics, and engineering program. In my country, it's still more of a patriarchal society. But women are becoming more powerful too in my country. We already have 2 presidents. And we have a lot of senators in Congress women. We also have a lot, in fact, in the academe in the Philippines, there are more women than men. Okay. So, but in the STEM career, there is still, okay, to develop STEM as a gender-inclusive program to increase the participation of women into STEM activities and STEM career opportunities. STEM for all versus STEM for the gifted. I'm guilty about this because one of my field is gifted in science education. In the Philippines, they provide a lot of funding to science schools to gifted. If you go for STEM, that means you are gifted in science. But STEM is important in everyday life. STEM is what we need. STEM is something that will help us solve our problems. And therefore, STEM should not only be offered to gifted students. STEM should be offered to everyone, even special education students. Even to special education students. Inclusive STEM education is what we need. STEM is not only for the gifted, but it is for everyone. With the new normal, I think because our schools, it's now impossible for our schools to open. In the Philippines, our school will open but we are going to use flexible learning approach by August. That means we will not yet allow our students to go to school. So with the new normal, and because students it is impossible for the students to go to school, STEM must therefore be brought to the home of the students. Home-based learning. STEM at home is the name of the game. With the new normal, STEM at home is the rule of the game. So how can we do this? There are no teachers at home. Parents are busy. You have siblings also doing a lot of things. So how can it be possible? I think science, technology, and mathematics, engineering is part of our everyday life. These are not just products of imagination. It emanates as a school from activities inside the home. And by saying this, we need to teach science skills, or science skills should be learned in simple STEM activities at home. We need to empower the parents. We need to empower the home as a school and to develop STEM skills for students. They can observe, they can participate in everyday activities at home. But we need a module, we need an online supplement to help the parents also process the learning of the students. We need to realize now that we are in a new normal, that observing, classifying, measuring, using numbers, entering, all these science processes, all the mathematical processes, all the engineering designs are possible now at home. So what I'm trying to say here is that STEM is becoming more practical than theoretical. The promise of a new normal is a promise of examination, meaning now it's time to practice what you learn. Now it's time to apply STEM in practical things that we do at home. Now we do a lot of it's time to make STEM more realistic rather than learning STEM sitting inside the classroom. So bring STEM at home. All these things can be learned by teaching or involving students in different activities at home. Parents could serve as facilitators. Teachers are now can now be teaching STEM in a remote learning mode. Due to the lockdowns and social distancing rules, STEM should be taught in a flexible learning mode. That's the challenge of the new normal. STEM should be taught in a flexible learning mode, meaning we consider the place where the students will learn, the pace or the time that the schedule will learn, the students will learn, and the mode of delivery, since it's impossible for them to go to school. So place, pace, and mode are important in bringing STEM to flexible learning. So what do we mean by this? Move STEM from school to where the learners are. The learners are locked down anywhere in their homes. Make STEM available by module, by online learning, by blended learning or flipped classroom to where they are. Before, in the school, it's a teacher-led. There's a teacher who will teach science, mathematics, engineering, and arts. But now, because of flexible learning, because of the new normal, we need to provide greater learner autonomy, learning by doing. The 1901 philosophy of John Dewey is now hunting us down and telling us again to make STEM, empower the learners, make STEM more practical for the learners. From dependent to independent or autonomous learner. In the classroom, our students are dependent of their teachers. But with the new normal, the challenge is to help the students become independent, autonomous learners. Now we ask ourselves, is it possible to do experiment at home? Is it possible to do engineering experiments or mathematics at home? My answer is also a question. When our forefathers developed the idea of science before the scientific revolution, before the 15th century. Did they think of that? The answer is yes, it is possible. All the disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics started as a human home activity. And therefore, we are just bringing back STEM as a home activity to develop independent and autonomous learners. Blackboards to computers. Okay, the new normal, because we are no longer inside the classroom. Those who can afford to have access, to have gadgets, to have access to computers or internet, can now use internet to learn. We use technology to reach out. From textbooks to learning modules or learning packets, learning modules that can be brought at home, that where the students can work at home. Interactive modules can also be done for students who have access to internet. From exams, where students will sit and do the exam in school, to authentic assessment. So what kind of authentic assessment for STEM can be provided to students? Virtual collaboration. Before it's impossible, but now it's possible. And we need to develop our students with what we call creative imagination. Of course, to the traditional teachers, they would say that it's better to close the school rather than just allowing the students to learn at home. But my friends, I tell you, no. In fact, much of who we are and what we learn, what we know, we learn that from our parents and from our home. Some teachers would question, but parents, not all parents are educated. They are not science. They did not finish high school. Some of my, especially in poor communities. But I guess with the proper learning modules and with the assistance of schools, it's still possible. So we are targeting two things here: bringing STEM literacy to the students in their home and bringing scientifically STEM literacy also to parents and their siblings. Problem-based learning. Okay? Project-based learning. Students can work on problems in their homes and where they are. They can do STEM projects, okay, with rubrics, of course, and they can do research-based learning in this new normal. So again, the new normal is changing how we teach STEM in our schools. Another challenge, of course, of restructuring is to empower every STEM teacher from facilitator of learning to become a learning coach. This is now our new role today as educators from kindergarten to graduate school. Gone are those days. Gone is the 20th century pedagogy of facilitating learning. Now we are embracing education 4.0 and education 5.0. We are now what we call learning coach. We provide the knowledge, we provide the information, but we allow the students to independently work on STEM projects. We allow our students to explore, and we allow our students to develop new knowledge and understanding based on their experiences. We serve as learning coach to our students. It's very important, my dear friends. We don't believe that the professors or the teachers are the sole authority of knowledge. With the 21st century, knowledge can be learned by experience. But of course, our role will be transformed. We are now what we call learning coach. We motivate our students. We cheer them up. We guide them. But we also believe that they can make a difference. We also believe that they are good. They can learn, provided we give them good guidance and good coaching for them to learn. In basic education, with the new normal, I guess we need to restructure or supplement the curriculum to put more emphasis on learning about microorganisms. You see, some people are busy buying alcohol, believing that alcohol could kill the virus, which is wrong. Okay, which is wrong. The alcohol cannot, well, of course, it can cleanse, it can help us eliminate bacteria in our body, but the virus cannot be solved by an ordinary alcohol. You see, ignorance is coming to our system now that we have experiencing the pandemic. We need to put more emphasis on this. Students should learn more about bacteria, about virus. Okay. We need to strengthen the biology component of our curriculum to put emphasis on this so that people will not be misled by any information. Diseases and vaccines, immune system and human health. And then mental health. We are experiencing a lot of stress. We are the students, even if we stay at home and do nothing, that is more stressful, I guess, than doing something or busy doing something. Mental health must be emphasized. There are some students who are committing suicides because of the pandemic. Now it's time for STEM to give comfort and learning to them. Data science is important. Sometimes there is a question of how the government is presenting the data to us. Okay, is this really true? These are the number of cases, number of survival, etc., etc. Even our college students do not participate because we are not teaching them data science. We are not teaching them to analyze data and to look at data perfectly. Okay, so we need to put emphasis on this so that the government and the health officers will not just make fool of us. Okay, human security is important. Boundaries are closing. People, they are losing their jobs. So we need to, STEM should provide an opportunity for a discourse, a scholastic discourse where we can put science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in understanding the issue of human security. Human security is not a political science context. It's not for politicians. It is not for the Congress or the president. It is for everyone. And as a STEM educator, you have a role to help the students look at human technology in the context of STEM learning. The materials engineering, everything should be emphasized to our curriculum. And communication system, ICT should be emphasized also for basic education in STEM. You see, science, mathematics, engineering, okay, technology are not just focusing on tiny bits of disciplinary subjects. Instead, we focus on multidisciplinary focus. And at the greater curricular emphasis, we need to focus the problems that we teach, our curriculum, to a higher transdisciplinary futuristic emphasis of STEM education. Like, for example, my example is not limited, of course, here. Environmental protection, ecological balance, eliminating malnutrition, food security, reducing poverty, alternative energy, green technology, design technology, space science, agriculture, human security, and engineering science, among others. We need to put more emphasis on big curricular topics rather than teaching small bits of disciplinary subject-based ideas. I'd like to end. I started with the concept of time, and I would like to end by again discussing the idea of time. From Brian Tracy, he said, "There is never enough time to do everything, but there is always enough time to do the most important thing." So my dear educators, esteemed educators from Indonesia and from other countries, yes, we are busy with the new normal. Yes, we are still doing our best to embrace the changes and challenges that we are doing. This is a time of transition. We are busy with our lives, and it is not easy to restructure in STEM at this time of pandemic, but there is always enough time to do the most important thing. And what is this most important thing? Again, is bringing back STEM education to where the learners are. To bring back STEM education from school to their homes and to where they are. With that, our common goal, okay, this most important thing is to look at our common goal. Our common goal is to make STEM a part of our culture. To go back to Kuhn's idea that science is a social activity, engineering is the application of science, mathematics is the light, the philosophy that guides us all. And technology is the application, of course, of science. All these things, we have to develop that, and we have to put that into what we call a STEM culture. And with that, my dear friends and my dear colleagues, I would like to end and say, terima kasih to everyone. Thank you very much. I hope this is right. I researched the internet. I saw that these are your national flowers. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening. I would like to entertain your questions later, maybe after the presentation of the second speaker. Dr. Arif?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Pawilan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, for giving such information and interesting presentation about restructuring STEM education. And I can catch that STEM is like coffee because I like coffee. This is what I remember from your presentation. Thank you very much. And then let's move to the second speaker, Mr. The question later. We will have question and answer session after second presentation. And let's move to second presenter, Mr. Kausovan Sopal. He is a PhD candidate in educational development at Hiroshima University, Japan. He works as a Vice Chief of Admission Office, Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports in Cambodia. And he obtained Bachelor of Education from Royal University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and obtained Master of Art from Hiroshima University, Japan. And his research interests are choices of STEM majors in higher education, productivity in higher education, total quality management in higher education. In today's webinar, he will talk about STEM education and longitudinal method in education research. Mr. Sopan Soval, how are you?
Yeah, fine.
Ohayo gozaimasu.
Yeah, ohayo gozaimasu.
Nyap-nyap.
Okay.
Okay. You have 30 minutes to deliver your presentations. The time is yours. Onegaishimasu.
Yeah. So, very good morning to Professor, ladies and gentlemen. So first of all, I would like to say thank you for the organizing committee for the invitation, and also thank you for to the participant for spending their valuable time for this webinar. So as you have been introduced, today I will be talking about the STEM education and also a longitudinal in education. Sorry. So these are the key outline that I'm going to talk. A bit different from the previous speaker, I'll be focusing on the STEM education, but it is in a more specific manner that I will focus on the snapshot from Cambodia with the current status and also issue. And secondly, I will talk on the longitudinal method, which I will talk about the concepts and also example from my doctoral dissertation. So once again, this presentation is based much more on the part of my dissertation, doctoral dissertation. So let's move to the first agenda, which is on STEM education. But as mentioned, I will be talking about the snapshot from Cambodia. Before I begin, I would like to emphasize, I also agree with the first speaker that we should, STEM was first as the integrated subject in teaching methodology. So in this model, we can see that in order to integrate the four subjects, four disciplinary, we have engineering, we have science, we have math, we have technology. So this is the model that we can employ to integrate the four subjects together to teach a student. The first step, it would be inquiry invitation, in which that we introduce the engineering topics to the student, and then we will guide them for the what we call the guided inquiry, to which they will integrate the science, integrate mathematics, and integrate technology in their investigation. The guided inquiry is led by the lecturer, the teacher, and then in the later stage, they will move to the open inquiry, in which they will conduct the experiment or investigate the problem by themselves. But they will use the science, mathematics, technology, and also the engineering. And the last part will be inquiry resolution. So this is just the to emphasize with the first speaker that the original concept is to teach the student with the integrated subjects of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But in this presentation, as I mentioned in the before, my presentation is much more from the different perspective in which that I will be talking about the STEM, but not the STEM as the at the lower secondary or upper secondary school, but I will talk about the STEM as the measure, as the interpret in measure at higher education. So actually the term STEM began in the early 1990s in the US as the science, mathematics, engineering, and technology, SMET. But later on, the National Science Foundation changed the term into STEM. And even nowadays, we have even the word STEAM, in which we have integrated the word arts or agriculture in that concepts. So based on this concept, the word STEMs in my presentation, it would focus on the subjects of mathematics or science, natural science, engineering, and also computer science. Sorry. So let's move to the contextual situation in Cambodia with regard to STEM education. I think not only Cambodia, but the country around the world is giving more emphasis on the STEM education or STEM graduate at higher education. So this is no exception in Cambodia, in which that in line with the rectangular strategy of the royal governments of Cambodia, that plan to shift the country industrial development to a broad-based industrial economy, and also to move the country to the higher middle-income country by 2030, and also high-income country in 2050. We have given more emphasis to STEM education, and also as reported by different organizations and also researchers, there is a great need of human resource in STEM field to respond to that current labor market demands. Not only the current condition in the current situation that we show the strong needs of a graduate in science or in STEM, but some report also predicted that there will be employment opportunity in the field is very high. And this is, I think that this is not very exceptional in Cambodian context, but also in the other context as well. Having seen that kinds of importance of STEMs, or I think the first concept is science education, science and mathematics education. Since 2010, Ministry of Education has implemented what we call the tracking system. By the term tracking systems here, I think the original idea is to orientate the student to choose where, the two track of science or social science, and this is to expose the student who are more talented in, or are more outstanding in science, to be in science tracks and also in social science track. So from these kinds of policy, in the student in grade 10 are required to choose whether they want to study in science or social science for their grade 11 and grade 12 education of upper secondary school. And another initiative that has been implemented by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport is the introductions of the STEM education policy, in which the policy is aimed to produce more human resource in STEM field to also for the country development. And with part of that kinds of policy initiative, another types of school that is called New Generation School. I think the concept is quite similar to the specialized Key STEM College in the UK, and also a Super Science High School in Japan. So that New Generation New Generation School was implemented in 2016. So with that kinds of two different school, as can be seen in this graph, in this table, one of the main difference between these two schools is on the numbers of science and mathematics learning hour, weekly learning hour in science and also social science between these two schools. As can be seen, the student in social science tracks will be more exposed to social science subjects, while the student in science track are more exposed to science and mathematics subjects. However, the total numbers of learning hour within a week is the same, and then to build more capacity of the student in science and mathematics and other types of school, as I mentioned before, is New Generation School has been introduced, and this is one of the main characteristics of that is the increase of teaching and learning hour within a week, especially in the subjects of science and mathematics. Up to now, we have, actually this is a pilot project we have from the UK Embassy. So up to now we have 11 primaries and also upper secondary school, New Generation School within 5 different provinces. And as I mentioned, one of the main characteristic difference between these two schools is on the increase of weekly learning hour from to 40 hours within a week. And the main increase is on the science and mathematics subject. So this is to build their knowledge background capacity in science so that they have more ability to pursue to higher education, as it is empirically found that if the students are more knowledgeable, if they are good at science and mathematics at upper secondary school or lower grade, they are more willing to pursue their science career or science major at higher education. And also in that kind of STEM policy, we have six main objectives, and one of the objectives is to implement what we call STEMs and problem-based learning methodology, so that the students are more willing to learn in a more different manner from the original teaching method, traditional teaching method. And these are just some of the example of current condition in the New Generation School. As before, the students are learning within a classroom with a crowded learning classroom, but now they are more exposed to different learning environment, which they can investigate, they can discuss, they can collaborate with the classmate, and also they have more chance for conducting experiments and also the other scientific activity within school and also outside school. As I agree with the first speaker that so not only in school but also in outside school, within the family, within the household, the student could also more exposed to STEM education or STEM learning. So with that kinds of condition, if we take a look at the academic enrollment perspective in the two track of science and social science at upper secondary school, we can see that, as can be seen on this graph, we can see that there are more students enrolling in science tracks, while very few students are in social science tracks. So from this graph, it seems to show a good trends to match with the government's policy to increase the science or STEM graduate at upper secondary, at high school, at higher education. However, if we take a look at the current condition in higher education, it seems that the trend is quite different in the way that the students seem to change their behaviors or attitude towards science, and then they tend to choose a non-STEM major as at higher education rather than a STEM major. So specifically, if you take a look at this graph, a non-STEM major account for about 73% of the total enrollment in higher education, while the science account for only 10, and technology 7, and engineering we have only 8, and mathematics we have only 2. So this seems to contradict with the country policy to enhance more or to produce more graduate in STEM at higher education. So from this, I can say that the country is also seeing the needs of the STEM graduate to match with the labor market demands and also for the country development trends. With that herein, some policy initiatives have been taken into consideration and implemented. However, there is still a mismatch between the needs and reality. While the country needs more human resource in STEM field, the reality is that we don't have many students enrolling in kinds of field at higher education. So this can be concluded there is a mismatch between upper secondary school, science, and higher education, STEM. So from the academic perspective, from a research perspective, from these kinds of problem, there should be a longitudinal investigation to see the change of the attitude, the change of behavior of the upper secondary school, and how it affects the Cambodian student, or how it affects the student transition from upper secondary school to higher education. And then we can use more human resource in STEM to match with the country development need. So that concludes the first part of my presentation on the current, just specifically on the current conditions of a Cambodian situation. And now let's move to another part. It is a longitudinal method in education research. Before I begin with the longitudinal investigation, I would just briefly describe or briefly differentiate between the three main families of a research method. We have the experimental method and cross-sectional method, and also the next one is longitudinal method. While the experimental method is trying to investigate the more or less just one key variable, one key intervention, and we want to know whether this intervention has any effects on the experimental group or not. For example, we implement STEM education, STEM teaching method, and then we compare that kinds of teaching method with the traditional teaching method. And we want to know if that kinds of teaching method can improve the teaching, maybe can improve the student learning outcome, or can improve the student attitude towards science or not. So this is from the experimental method family. Second one is the cross-sectional method. So by the term cross-sectional method, we have then the concepts that we have more than one case, and more than one case of the participant, and also we have more than one variable in which we will investigate the patterns of association between the variable. However, this kinds of method is mainly conducted at a single point in time, just one time. So then the cross-sectional method is just provide the snapshot of the population at a particular point in time. Next, which is the last family that of research method that I'm going to present, is the longitudinal method. That back to about 30 years ago, the longitudinal data, especially in the sociology education, has mainly the origin of the longitudinal data has been dated back to 300 years ago. However, the proper sense of the longitudinal design in educational research just has been implemented or has been conducted in the 18th century. And this is mainly for the fields of medicine or psychology. However, by the late 1920th and 1930th, many longitudinal studies were conducted in the US. And when we hear the terms longitudinal, I think you might have the concepts that these kinds of study will be conducted over a period of time, which is different from the cross-sectional method that we conduct mainly or at a single point in time. And another concepts that we might familiar when we might heard when we might hear when we hear think of the word longitudinal method is the developmental process, in which we want to investigate how the human grow, especially from a different time period. So then what is a longitudinal method? So as I mentioned before, the longitudinal method is the family of the method which tell about the change of the individual at the micro level. And this family is opposite to the cross-sectional research. And actually it extension of the survey method, in which that the student might have to complete the survey questionnaire and also questionnaire or interview at different point in time. And this is mainly to measure or to understand the social change or to understand the cultural influence over a time period. However, because of the times and also the cost in conducting in longitudinal method, this kinds of method is little used designed in social research. Another concept of a longitudinal method is the repeated measurement. As I mentioned before, we should conduct the survey at least 2 waves. Usually we conduct more than 2 waves in order to see the change of the student of the sample behaviors or the attitude. And on a short-term basis, the investigation might take about several weeks or months, but on a long-term study, it might extend to more than over many years. Basically, we have many different kinds of design. The longitudinal is one of the key, the main method, but then we have different kinds of design. And in here, I will talk about the 2 different design. The first one is all panel design, and second one is a cohort design. By the word panel, it means that we try to follow up with the same participant throughout the study. Example, if we investigate the sample for three main waves of data collection, then we should follow up with that group of sample throughout the 3 waves of data collection. However, with the cohort design, we have different kinds of different group of sample, but they share the same characteristics. They share the same characteristics. And this is the example of how we write the design, how we mention the longitudinal method design when we are writing our research paper. A longitudinal design in my study is from the quantitative approach. So this is the approach. The research approach, we have a quantitative and also the qualitative approach, and then it will narrow down to the longitudinal method. So the method that I will use to employ the data collection is longitudinal. However, because I want to repeat the same survey, the same measurement with my sample, because as I mentioned before, I want to investigate how the students change their behavior from the upper secondary school to higher education. So repeated measurement is strongly appropriate. And then when we employ the longitudinal design, longitudinal method or panel design, we should have the clear justification that not the student behavior, not only to measure the behavior, it should not be only a one-time process, but a longitudinal process that begins from the early grade to the later grade. And this can be employed to understand the behavior of change of the variable over times. And this is the example of the data collection. As I mentioned before, in longitudinal method, at least you should collect data at least 3 waves. So then in this study, I also conduct the 3 waves of data collection. And because I want to measure how they change their behavior from the upper secondary school to higher education, I begin with the grade 11 student, in which they started to choose with social track and science track at upper secondary school. And then I follow up with them throughout the academic year until grade 12. To collect the data, we should keep in mind that the method of data collection can fall into 3 main methods. The first one is repeated cross-sectional study. This is mainly what we call mainly for the trend study, in which we want to investigate how the student change from a period from time to time. But actually, this is not usually it is not the same participant. Example, we conduct the PISA test, in which we conduct within a 3-year period, and then we conducted with the student age with 15 years old of age, and then we conduct this year, and then the next 3 years we also conduct that kinds of study with the student of the same age, with the same cohort. Second method of data collection is what we call the prospective longitudinal study, and this is mainly for the panel design, in which we investigate, we follow up with the same subjects repeatedly from time to time. For example, if we have 3 waves of data collection, we will follow up with them for 3 time period. And usually, these kinds of study will ask them to just to evaluate their performance or behavior prospectively. The third one is retrospective longitudinal study. This kinds of study is mainly called a event history, in which we try to measure something that has already happened. For example, if we want to study the student dropout, we can conduct it prospectively or retrospectively. In the retrospective manner, the student has already dropped from school, out of school, but then we ask them back for the factors or any variable that caused them to drop. Among these 3 kinds of study, prospective study are considered to be truly longitudinal approach or method, in which it can provide most reliable data and also the change of student knowledge and also attitude. And this is just the graphical pictures on how we conduct the data collection prospectively or retrospectively. For example, this is the event which has already happened, and if we ask them to refer back to what activity or what has been done before the activity even happened, that is called retrospective. But if we ask them to foresee what will happen in the next after the event happened, that is called prospective design. Another key idea to consider, especially a researcher or student who are going to conduct the longitudinal method, is the data file management. In the longitudinal method, especially for the panel design, we should keep the identities of the participant for the follow-up survey. And this can be one of the issues with regard to the ethical consideration, because to some extent we are not advised to collect their personal information in our study. So to avoid these kinds of problem, one of the key technique is to have what we call the cover notes of the to keep records of the participant, and that cover note will be attached with the questionnaire of our survey. Attached with our survey questionnaire. That cover node will be taken out from the survey questionnaire after the data has been coded and entered into our data file spreadsheet. And because one of the main issue in longitudinal this method is the large amounts of data we will collect from our sample. So then we should be careful with the how we keep the data. So from my experience is that each data file for each waves of data collection should be kept secure, should be made, and that from that separate data file we will compile into one main data file, and we will keep all the missing data from the participant so that we do not lose our sample. And this is the examples of the data, analysis framework for the study. Because my study was conducted in the longitudinal method with panel design, so I follow up with the same student for 3 waves of data collection. So then, in this kinds of the design, we should take into consideration what we call the time invariant variable. That is the variable that do not change across time. For example, gender. The gender will not change even we measure it in how many times we measure. And another group of variable is a time varying covariate, mean the variable that gonna change the values or gonna change over the time period. And lastly, I would provide some kinds of extent analysis method that can be used to that can be employed to analyze longitudinal data. The first method is called structural equation modeling. So this kinds of model will investigate the interaction effects or direct and indirect effects of the variable on the outcome variable. And this is good for analyzing the longitudinal data. Second families of the analysis method is a multi-level analysis, or what we call the hierarchical linear modeling. So this kinds of data is also predict the outcome variable, but one of the key difference is that we can structure the data into different class, different different levels of analysis. For example, we can nest the individual level as one group, and then because the individual student are nested, group within the same classroom or the same school, then that can be analyzed by seeing the individual different from a class and also from the school level. And another kinds of analysis is called event history analysis, which employ the cup regression in the regression family. So this take into account the time constant and also time varying covariate, and also the concepts of right sensor, in which that sometimes the event does not happen at the times of our observation. So these are the key main analysis methods that have been employed in the longitudinal data. So I have mentioned about the what is longitudinal research, and also some analysis method that can be used to that can be employed to analyze the longitudinal data. But we should also consider some of the advantage and also disadvantage when we want to conduct this kinds of method research design. So the advantage is that we can analyze the duration of social phenomena, and which highlight the different change between period from one period to another period. And another key advantage of the longitudinal design is the subject's intra-individual and also individual change over times. So that can be concluded that the longitudinal design is very good in terms that we want to investigate the change of the variable across time period. And however, even though this method provides a numbers of advantage, it also provides some issue that we should also take into consideration. For example, the first one is what we call the mortality rate, which is the rate of the loss of our sample. Sometimes because they choose to participate in our study at the later stage of data collection, or sometimes they might pass away, or sometimes they might migrate to the other parts that we cannot access them. Another issue is the missing answer from the respondent, so the incomplete response. And some method of data analysis for longitudinal method require large numbers of samples. So then if we miss a numbers of response from the our respondent, we also have a great deal of issue. We also have the high risk of measurement error, because we measure at one time period, it might have some error, and then when we measure one or two second time or third time, the error will have just keep on increasing. And sometimes, even though we want to measure the change, but we could not differentiate whether the change is truly a true change, or the change is not a true change. So that is also one of the issues. And another key issue is the threat to internal validity, in which take into account the panel conditioning. Panel conditioning means that sometimes the students are familiar with the test because they have been involved in our test in our first survey, and then when they participate in the second survey, they have some kinds of concept in that already. Sometimes it can cause because of the maturation. Maturation refer to how mature we are, because people keep growing from time to time. So the change might not be influenced of the interventions or program, but because of the change of the human grow. And sometimes because of the history of the event that they involve not in our program. The two last issue that you should consider is the complexities of analysis, because as I have mentioned, we have a numbers of a large amount of data, so that can complex our analysis of that kinds of data. And also the last one is the costing and also the timing for data collection or for conducting the study. So from that, I can conclude that while on the one hand, longitudinal data could provide information about the individual behaviors or other change of behavior, but on the other hand, the use of this design can also pose crucial theoretical and also methodological problem. And however, if we really want to investigate the change of the participant over time, longitudinal data is indispensable research method to be considered. And that concludes my presentation, or my presentation on the concepts of STEM education in Cambodia, and also the longitudinal design in education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sufan Sopal, for your nice presentation. I feel that headache when I listen to your presentation about longitudinal study. Maybe I need to learn more and more.
Yeah. Longitudinal study is not very easy.
Okay, yes. I think it's very difficult. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to question and answer session. If you have any question, I would like to have 3 questions from the participants. Yeah, maybe you can raise your hand by giving the reaction like this one. Okay. From overseas country, from Cambodia, maybe from Japan, from India, or from Thailand. If you have any question, you can ask directly to the speakers. Oh, I have a private message from the participant. The first question is from Eva Safira, and the question is how to implement engineering in virtual learning. and how to give the effective instruction when implementing project-based learning, which is focusing on innovation project from students. Maybe this is question for Dr. Pawilen.
So I'd like to thank you for that question.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask can you please give me the first question first? Because there
Okay,
are
how to implement engineering in virtual learning?
Okay, engineering and virtual learning. Now what is being done in education as part of innovation is the use of online simulations and project-based learning. These are two effective strategies now, or online delivery mode that is used now to teach engineering, project-based learning, and online simulations, including sometimes there are also questions about laboratories and everything, but there are learning management systems now. There are online education modes now that are used to supplement the laboratory and at the same time the practical aspect of engineering science in the classroom. So they can do that now at home. So there are online simulations that can be done. In the absence of such, if the students do not have access to technology, then we can use project-based learning in a modular form, something that they can do inside the home. I hope I was able to answer the first question. The second question, please.
And the second question is, and how to give the effective instruction when implementing project-based learning, which is focusing on innovation project from students.
Okay, you mentioned about project-based learning and innovation projects. The first thing that we have to do is one, to ensure that the projects that we give to students are really gearing towards innovation, because not all projects that are given is for innovation. Sometimes they are just repetitive. So that's the first challenge. Number two, of course, is to develop the instructional material, because they have to bring this inside in their homes, in their house, in the places where they are. And three, of course, we need to provide them the rubrics, the guide on how the students will do these projects in where they are, whether in any using any delivery mode, in any place, or at any pace. So those are important things that can be ensured. And again, make sure that the activity will really lead to the development of innovation skill and not at the repetitive things that we do inside the classroom.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pawilen. And actually, I have a lot of questions here in my private message. Maybe I will call one by one. From Husna. Husna from, she is a teacher of senior high school in Al-Azhar. Hello, Husna, can you hear me? Husna? Okay, maybe I will read the question from Husna. The first question is, I would like to ask about how the online learning in the Philippines and Cambodia during this pandemic. Technically, the teacher still routinely meets face-to-face or online with students every week, or teacher only provide learning module and assignment via online.
Okay, so I'll answer it first. In the Philippines, we do both, because the access to technology is also a problem. So there is what we call DepEd, meaning Department of Education Learning Commons. That is the LMS, or Learning Management System, used by the Department of Education for those who can have access to internet and technology in their home. Last night, there was also an announcement from our education system that they will make use of TV. 15% of the time at television will be spent, okay, to learning in television, by radio, and of course by module. There is what we call bringing learning packets at home that can be delivered, and we are coordinating this to the local government units, because it's impossible for the teachers to visit all the schools. We're quite prepared for that because there is already the LMS. But for those who are not or do not have any gadgets or technology at home, we use module, we use TV, and we use learning packets to reach them.
Module TV.
So flexible learning is really the key.
Okay, thank you. And how about in Cambodia, Mr. Sopal?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we share more or less the same problem within these kinds of COVID-19 pandemic. In Cambodia, currently we have actually we have closed our schools in February or something. But then up to now, we have some kinds of online learning. We have one of the key initiative is the TV. We have set up a TV for online learning in which that even the student do not access to the internet service, they could also watch TV. And this TV have will play all the lesson from grade 1 to grade 12 to the student. So they have the specific time schedule that they can watch the lesson from different teacher. Also, we have some kinds of online learning media. We have use what we call the e-learning, and that usually play through the social media or social network. And I think with these kinds of developments of social network, we also have the advantages of using that kinds of network to enhance our online learning system during this kinds of pandemic.
Yeah, I think similar condition amongst Philippines, Cambodia, and Indonesia. We are struggling when the network is slow, not stable. Then television or radio is the best solution. Okay, and then the second question from Husna is for STEM learning based on STEM focus that you have explained. Can you give an example of the material presentation or the material analysis on the STEM model and how the instrument assessment is? Okay, I repeat. For STEM learning based on the STEM focus that you have explained, can you give an example of the material presentation or the material analysis on the STEM model and how the instrument assessment is? Maybe Dr. Pavilan.
What I do actually, for example, because my idea is providing. At first, I did a study and I did an experiment for young children using STEM education. We call that Iharis Academy, that focuses on innovation. So in fact, we integrated music and we integrated arts and physical education as component, and also with history, because science also includes history. So we experimented with young children, and what we did is that we give them projects, problem-based learning. For example, one of the other things that we do is for the students to look at clean water sources. So using available technology that they have, they experimented on water, and then they experimented on water, and because water is important in our everyday life, so they need to see clean sources, why the water is clean, dirty, etc. And then because with the Philippines, like Indonesia, I guess we also have a lot of volcano, so they did examination on how a volcano erupts using simple experiments that they can do using soda water and everything, vinegar, and so to that they can see how a volcano erupts. So a lot of experiments, in fact 10 projects that we did for our students, including the changing colors of leaves, mixing, something like that. And then at the end, what we did is for the students to present. So there is a presentation for the students to present in a community, in a barangay. They will share their experiment. Right? They will share their study. They are dressed like a scientist with a white robe, and then they will present that to the students. So that is the best form actually of what we call this assessment for students, when they present an authentic, their real life authentic experience to the community and to the people, to other students. Because science communication is very important. Sometimes they are very good in doing experiments, they are doing good and they are doing projects, but they cannot express themselves. It is not just talking in English. It's even communicating science ideas in the vernacular or in the mother tongue. Sometimes they cannot explain. Sometimes it's a problem with scientists. They do experiment, but they cannot explain their experiment. They write papers, but they cannot transform that into public speaking, something like that. And the good thing about STEM is that we need to popularize science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We need the people to know. So the best way, again, is through authentic learning experiences, performance assessment, and giving realistic, real-life application of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics activities that they can do at home, something that they can relate to, something that is relevant to them. So that is what we did. Again, I'll repeat, one, practical use, practical activities. We call that, what we call this, indigenization. and then at the same time improvisation of science, to using real life authentic assessment and performance-based assessment. That is when we allow the students then to share their ideas. Science fair is one example of a portfolio authentic experience for young children. And this is something that the people enjoyed, especially they're explaining science concepts, engineering, mathematics projects, simple things at home that they do at home, I mean, and then they present that to elder people. It also develops their confidence. And I also experimented with the teacher education students. What I did, again, is for them to go to a community. They will examine the needs of the people. They will look at the problems and issues. They will develop a module, both online and written module. They will try out that module, and at the same time, they will develop what they call, I develop an instructional design. I call it 3 R's: read, reflect, respond. So the students, again, are led to science communication. They are led to reflect on science issues, technology issues, even traffic problems in Manila. Or I did an experiment for teacher education for that. So why is there traffic? That's the problem, something like that. It's something that is related to them, because that is when we engage them more and motivate them more to if the topics and projects are related to their experience, and then we allow them to share. Again, authentic experience is the best form of assessment and learning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So 3R, read the online module, reflect, and then respond. Okay, thank you, Dr. Pawilen. It's a good answer. And then next question from Benny Setiawan from Taiwan. Mr. Benny, can you hear me? Mr. Benny? Hello? Okay, I will read the question from Mr. Benny Setiawan from Taiwan. Based on the first speaker that STEM or STEAM has correlated with indigenous science area, can you explain further how to integrate between STEM or STEAM and indigenous science? Please give an example. Thank you in advance.
Oh, that's a very good question. First, I would like to remind everyone that science started with history. That science was developed by our forefathers. That science did not start at the laboratory, but it started at the home, at the farm, and at the same time in the mountains, in the seas, wherever they are. Science, according to Kuhn, again, is a social activity. It's part of culture. Now, when we think about engineering science, when you look at the tools that the people use for farming, when you look at the tools that the people use, the technology that is used for farming, indigenous tools, for fishing, the tools the technology that they use at home, these are the activities, basic activities that led us to realize that engineering need not to be grand. Engineering, the seed of engineering innovation is right there in us. It is part of our heritage. Okay, it is part of our heritage. Indigenous science is not quite different from Western science. For in the history of science, the history of mathematics, mathematics started as an indigenous activity. Science started, technology and engineering started as an indigenous activity. In fact, if you look at the history of science, technology, and mathematics, our Muslim brothers started it all. Okay, it is not the West who developed all their ideas. It started as a human activity. It started as a strategy for people to survive. Okay, so it is very much aligned. It is very much part of engineering. Because sometimes when we think of engineering, we are always thinking of grand projects. When we teach engineering to young children, we talk about machines. But when we let them think about how engineering science was introduced by our parents, by our ancestors, they started to develop tools from rocks, from stones, from simple metals, from simple objects, just to have something that they can use in everyday life. They build dams, they build farms, they build houses, they build structures that until now, it's still part of our wonders. Okay, these are solved by people who are not scientists, who are not mathematicians, but they have imbibed the spirit of science, of mathematics and technology, engineering, and engineering. Indigenous science is part of our life. It's what we call is the spirituality in us, our essence, our will to survive. So there is really a serious and at the same time it's a practical connection between indigenous science and STEM education. STEM was rooted from indigenous activity because science started with that. It's only when the Western ideas came in that they compartmentalize. Oh, everything now is from the West. When we think about science, we go look at the Greeks, at the Europeans, but it's not. No, if you look carefully at the documents, no, it is part of our human survival. So indigenous science is very much part of STEM activities, and we should start with that. We should start with that, so that the people would say that, oh, I'm very proud. I know that, well, Galileo Galilei is a European, but I know that my grandfather is also a scientist working in our farm. Our mother is also a scientist or a technologist working in our home. So they can see that science is not just a vague idea. It's not just a broad idea. That scientists are not those who are getting the PhDs and the Nobel Prize winners. But science is very much part of our everyday life. You see, when our ancestors think of all about these things, they never thought of fame. They never thought of award. They just want to survive. They just want to live. They just want to give a good life to their children. And that is the goal of science. That is the vision of STEM. That's why I started my restructuring idea with the vision, going back. Why do we do this? Not because we want to, not because we want not to become number one, but because we want to serve our country and our people. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Roylen. And the next question is from Sin Sokuntia, maybe from Myanmar or Cambodia, I forget. Hello, Sokuntia-sang, can you hear me? Hello, Kuntia-sang, Sokuntia. Okay, maybe I will read the question from Sin Sokuntia. Hi, I have some questions. Which level of basic education that start to introduce the STEM education? This is the first question. Which level of basic education that start to introduce the STEM education? And the second question, how to integrate STEM education with the other subject within the school curriculum? Thank you very much.
Okay. So I'd like to answer that. What level? In my country, it is integrated in the intermediate grades, meaning from grade 4. But I experimented. I started in kindergarten, and it's possible. Yes, curiosity starts with young children. So science, technology, and STEM curiosity starts with young children. To start STEM in kindergarten would be a noble thing to do. Okay, so actually, the earliest possible time that we introduce STEM, the better. Although, of course, people, because they have a restructured mind of the curriculum, would agree and would say that, oh, it's better to teach them in the intermediate, or at least in senior high school, in junior high school, when the people already know how to do this and do that. But for me, I beg to disagree. And then I develop STEM materials for the whole country for young children, so starting with kindergarten. So I believe that it should start from kindergarten, because science and mathematics are taught in a fragmented manner in basic education. It is only beginning to be started in the intermediate until junior or senior high school. Now, with how to integrate STEM with other subjects or with other disciplines, well, remember that STEM is already an integrated or interdisciplinary discipline. First, we need to strengthen that. Number two is to look at the curriculum themes, meaning we are not just integrating one subject because we think that there is a connection. No, it has to be a purposive act. Okay, we need to restructure the whole curriculum. If we want a science-based curriculum, I did a paper and I presented in Melbourne about it, a science-based curriculum, because we already, there is a fascination now of many people and bureaucrats about science. I think it could start with that. Okay, we need to develop we need to transform our school into a STEM school, into a STEM themed curriculum. So again, an integrated interdisciplinary curriculum model is one. We need to look at the standards. We need to look at the competencies. And then we find ways on how to integrate the commonalities. Because sometimes, or there is another way. One is to introduce what we call the thematic or an integrated curriculum, a whole integration approach, meaning we select the themes from issues or from problems or from multidisciplinary topics, and then from there we provide the integrated activities. That's the Western model. Okay, but for me, I do believe in what we call a more purposive way of integrating STEM, meaning a STEM-based curriculum to restructure all the courses, to include the history of science and mathematics in the learning of history. Okay, but it's not something that is not Western, of course. To include engineering concept, engineering design concept in home economics and in the arts and on all the subjects, because these are all the core. Remember in curriculum, we say that these are the content courses, except for mathematics, because math is a tool course. So math can be integrated anywhere. We cannot learn anything without mathematics. So that's the good thing, because there is already an established connection among them. It's just that educators are presenting them in a very fragmented mode, which is something I guess that is wrong, because our brain is not thinking in a fragmented way. We always think in an interdisciplinary way. So these are the two approaches that you can do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Prawilan. Actually, I have a lot of questions here in my private message, but I will choose two for the last question. First, this is from Faisal Fasri Akmal to Mr. Sofan Sopal. Would you mind to give an example of the implementation of development product by using longitudinal studies? So I repeat, would you mind to give an example of the implementation of the development product by using longitudinal studies? Thank you. And the second question to Dr. Prawilan. Have you applied the learning STEM from home during few months of COVID-19? What is experience that have you got from Irwandi STEM Center, Syiah Kuala University Aceh, Indonesia? Okay, this is the last question. Maybe from Sofan Sopal, Mr. Sofan Sopal, can you answer the question from Faisal Fasri Akmal first?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm not sure if I understand the question clearly. So, an example of the development
product. I mean, what you can produce from the longitudinal study. Is it information? Is it a track? Or, for example, in my research, I produce like a simulation. But what is the developmental product in your study?
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for the clarification. Actually, the nature of the longitudinal method is to understand the change of behavior of the participant. So the final, the ultimate goal is we understand how the student change the behavior towards something. For example, I want to measure how the student choose the measure, how they choose the measure from the upper secondary school to higher education. So finally, the product that I want to produce is the models on how the student change their behavior and how those change will affect the choice of the higher education measure. The model on choice of higher education measure based on the longitudinal perspective.
Okay, maybe is it implies to the policy in your country?
Yeah. So from the policy perspective, it means that we will just understand at what stage we should focus on these variable factors, at what stage we should focus on the other factor, right? So then we understand from the holistic perspective of the student behavior.
Okay, thank you. I hope it can answer question from Faisal Fasri Akmal. And then last question from Irwandi, Mr. Irwandi from Syiah Kuala University Aceh. Have you applied the learning STEM from home during few months of COVID-19? What is experience have you got? Maybe answered by Dr. Prawilan.
Yes. Yes, we did. The experience, of course, is quite toxic first, because we are in the period of adjustment. Remember that when COVID-19, when the lockdown was declared in the Philippines, the schools are about to close. They are at the final phase of their schooling. They're doing their exams. and that they're about to do their final exams. So that makes things toxic, of course, and stressing for students. But later on, with the introduction of what we call the flexible learning mode, okay, the students and the teachers are starting to adjust. But like any educational activity, it is not easy to adjust because first we need to train the teachers, and we are running out of time because we have to open again the school year this August. In fact, it could have been June. June 1 is really the start of schooling, but because of the pandemic, we moved it to August. So we are now in the process of preparing all the necessary documents, meaning the materials, and the online, synchronous and asynchronous materials for young children. So first, again, it was toxic and stressing. But little by little, we are getting to our target. Little by little, we are getting to target. But based on our experience, one of the first thing I said, and I guess I would like to advise this also to our friends in Indonesia and another country, the first thing that we have to do is to convince to the parents that one, learning is possible to be done at home. Because some of the parents would prefer just to close the school and close schooling. No need to have the homeschooling, or no need to have flexible learning. Okay, just close the school and we'll just open the school when the vaccine will be developed. But our education system says no, because we will help each other. We are all together. We are all together in this fight against COVID-19. So if it is stressing to you, it is also stressing to us. But again, the call of the Department of Education is collaboration and creativity, acceptance of the challenges, because this is already the new normal. Even with the vaccine, this is already the new normal. We may go back to school, but flexible learning now is the name of the game. So that's it. That's it. We will get there. We will get there. We will get there. It is not easy to adjust. It is not easy. But we have to make sure that we help each other. Thinking as one, acting as one, doing as one is very important now. While we invite questions, while we invite oppositions, while we invite arguments, but more than opposition and arguments is a goal. Our goal is to help our students learn and to help our people survive. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is also conclusion of this webinar, flexible learning to solve the problem against COVID-19. Actually, I have a lot of questions in my private message, but the time is up. So I'm so sorry that I cannot read your question to the speakers. I have apologized. And this is come to the end of this webinar. Please give applause to the speakers and for you all by giving this reaction. This is online. Okay. And I would like to thank you so much to the speaker for informative and interesting presentation, and also the answer, and also the participation participants for very active question. Hopefully this webinar will be beneficial for everybody. Thank you for your attention. I give the time to the MC, Ms. Stefani Diah Pamela Sari.
Thank you very much too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, closing.
Thank you very much for our moderator and also speaker especially. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our session today. And the last but not least, we want to thank to the Dean, speakers for very valuable information to improve our understanding of STEM, organizing committee, and especially all participants for contributing to our webinar and asking questions. I personally apologize if I might say inappropriate speech. Once again, thank you for watching, and we will see you in other webinar series from Department of Integrated Science. So thank you for watching and see you next time. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Batin.
Thank you for all.
Mohon maaf, pertanyaan tidak bisa disampaikan karena waktunya sudah atas.
Sukses Kak Arif.
Pak Mas Rukan.
Ya, sukses.
Terima kasih Pak Irwandi.
Sampai saya iklankan di Facebook. Sertai saya. Saya pantau
Terus saja ya, kan nggak ada yang diprogram.
di highlight.
Materi nanti akan kita unduh.
Modelnya cuma 100.000.
You will able to start terminally.
Terima kasih semuanya. Ini pembicaranya dia, soalnya nggak ngutang ya.
Sukses Mas Taufik.
Bayar.
Tadi 16 ada webinar kedua.
Mas di apa namanya? Pakai Google Classroom biasa. Bayar 350 ini. Tapi dibatasi 5 orang, nggak sampai 10.
Alhamdulillah.
Bisa susah. Soalnya modelnya remote ya Pak. Itu nanti kayak kendala itu nanti langsung dikendalikan dari sini. 5 sampai 10 itu udah orang.